I use ETFs. I wanted to just show this to you quickly because I use ETFs to essentially look at the state of the market. So this is a workspace I use a lot. I do a webinar on Thursdays for our clients, and this is essentially the workspace I use. And what I'm looking at here is these are some of the big major ETFs in the market that allow us to really kind of see where the strength is. And as I look at this right now, I like to look at things from different time frames. So if I look at this, I can sort the different ETFs by different time frames and to see how is performance in a 1 week period, which I set as 5D for 5 days, or a 10-day period, 2 weeks, or the 1 month, which is set to 21 days. What's interesting to me, now these are trading days, which is why it says 21D. Now, I want to just quickly show what's very interesting to me here is my mouse is suddenly acting strange. Here we go. All right. If you look in the last month, the IGV, which is software, has had a huge acceleration. You can see in the last 3 months, it's only up 3%. In the last month, it's up over 8%. So we've seen in the last month a very quick pivot toward things like software, which is interesting because software is a non-cyclical area. If we also look here, we can see in the last month, we see things like materials, worst performing part of the market. In the last kind of month to 3 months, we see energy doing very poorly. We see industrials underperforming. So we're seeing a strength right now in things like software at the very same time that we're seeing a weakening in things like industrials and materials and energy. So this market is now shifting toward a sense of a slower economy, and it's starting to behave more like I said, before we started getting inflation in 2021 and 2022. So I think that's kind of the backdrop I have here. Another thing about this is that I have created indicators, and there's some great indicators that you get with TradeStation, but you can also create your own. And what I can do here is I can actually look at these different ETFs, and I can see, for example, this is showing the moving averages, and I can see that for the for something like the S&P or for the communications or technology, the 20-day moving average is above the 50-day, but for some of these others like industrials or utilities, it's below. So this is just a very simple way to look at trends, to look at where the moving averages are, and you can sort these using this tool called Radar Screen. Now, next thing I want to do, because earnings season is coming up, is here's another tab I have set up that is just for preparing for earnings season. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to import the entire S&P 500. It's going to take a minute or two to load, and while we're doing that, I want to take you over to some of the ways I like to use the charts here. Now, obviously, there's all kinds of ways to set up charts. But what I've done with this one is I have two things here. I have a daily chart and I have an hourly chart. So, there's a lot of different ways to look for patterns. And just to keep it simple, what I'm going to do for these here is just show the basic idea of some trend following. One thing we might want to be potentially looking for are stocks that are trending upward, that have a short-term pullback of some kind. It's a pretty standard sort of approach for things. So one way to do that with something like this, I know Tony likes MACD, and I do too. I like to use it sometimes. So if you look at something like for Apple here, some of the opportunities that TradeStation, was flagging to me in the last week or two, and that, this is an example of how it can be used. We can see here that MACD was rising, and we can see that it fell under the 9-day simple moving average. So I want to point this out because I'm next going to show you, after I move away from the charts, ways that you can set up the alerts around these indicators, which is looking for that sort of bullish trend with the short-term oversold condition or the short-term pullback. So this was an interesting one right there in Apple, that a lot of sort of opportunities would have come up. And, I like to kind of look for similar things that might be happening like that right now. And I'm not sure if there are any, so we'll have to kind of look because this market is kind of extended. Also, you can see something like Meta was following a similar pattern. Again, the MACD was rising, and then you also have the 9-day moving average. Now, what I also like to do is to look over the hourly chart, because what's very interesting is that you can see very often you get the most clear, you can see those pullbacks on the hourly chart with the RSI. So it's interesting is if you look at something like NVIDIA, a really good example of this is as it was trending higher, look here at how NVIDIA had this pullback with RSI on the hourly dipping. You can see these opportunities I like to kind of see. So I'm always using the daily chart in conjunction with the hourly chart. And this is something that for people who are looking for trend following can be an interesting technique. Now, the thing is, RSI traditionally is set up for an oversold condition at 30, but you can adjust this and move it up. And you, for example, could have a list of stocks you want to see with an RSI running with an hourly time frame. And if it goes to 50, you get alerted. Those are some of the sort of functionality you can set up for people who are looking for trend following. Another example of something like this where the daily and the hourly work well together is something like Amazon. Back on June 28th, we're trying to see, I wrote down in my notes that on June 28th, this one had a signal for also RSI pulling back. I'm trying to actually see. I'm sorry, this one. I'll have to keep moving on this. But no, it was on this one. Yeah, it was this pullback on the daily, and then it was visible right here as well, where the RSI pulled back under 50. That was the thing I wanted to point out. Anyway, so these are the sort of examples of ways you can have your list going, and by using a combination of the daily and hourly, you can put these right next to each other, and you can look for these sort of opportunities. Now, I want to mention the two other things that I'm kind of looking for right now, potentially, is, well, the one I'm looking for is Snap. I want to point out that this is what I'm just kind of watching, because another thing I have on this chart is the breakout. This is basically shows you when a stock makes a new high in the last 14 days. And when things start to kind of break out, this can give you potential signals. So I'm watching to see if these dots, which are called show me's, start lighting up again. I'm going to now show you how all these things work on the tracking tool, which is called Radar Screen. I will mention that as some of these stocks started moving, the one that was a good example of this recently was Palantir.